The message came on a Tuesday. All screens across Earth showed the same thing at once. A tall gray creature with 4 eyes and sharp teeth looked down at humanity. Its skin was like rough stone, and it wore armor that glowed with strange lights. "People of Earth," the alien said in perfect English, "I am Fleet Commander Exerthan of the Zarlek Imperium. Your planet is now part of our territory. Surrender now, and we will be kind rulers. Fight, and you will not survive. You have 3 Earth days to decide." Then the screens went dark. In the White House war room, President Clark slammed his fist on the table. "We will not surrender our planet without a fight." Captain John Miller stood at attention. At 42, he had seen many battles but never thought he would face aliens. His brown hair was cut short, and a scar ran across his cheek from a battle years ago. "Captain Miller, you will lead our response team," the president said. "We need to talk to these aliens before they attack." "Yes, sir," Miller replied. "But how do we reach them?" As if to answer, another message came in. This one was different. The alien on screen had blue skin and gentle eyes. "People of Earth, I am Ambassador Krell of the Krall Collective. We have fought the Zarlek for many years. They destroy all who stand against them. We offer our help and friendship." 2 days later, Captain Miller and his team boarded a Krall ship heading to meet with the Zarlek. His team included 5 soldiers and 2 scientists. One scientist, Dr. Susan White, studied alien languages. The other, Dr. Bill Green, knew about space technology. "I don't trust either of these alien groups," said Lieutenant Greg Peters as they flew through space. "But the blue ones seem less likely to eat us." Dr. White smiled. "The Krall have been helpful so far. They gave us technology to speak with the Zarlek." The meeting was set for neutral space, a small moon orbiting an empty planet. When they arrived, Miller saw the Zarlek ship. It was huge and shaped like a knife, black and sharp against the stars. "Stay alert," Miller told his team as they landed. "But remember, we're here for peace." The meeting room was cold. 3 Zarlek waited inside, standing tall on their 4 legs. The leader, General Exerthan, looked down at the humans with all 4 of his eyes. "You chose to come rather than surrender," Exerthan said. "Brave but foolish." Miller stepped forward. "We come to understand why you claim our planet. Earth has done nothing to the Zarlek." Exerthan made a sound like rocks grinding together. Miller realized it was laughter. "We need no reason beyond that we want it," the general said. "Your planet has resources and a good position for our expansion." For 2 hours, Miller tried to negotiate. The Zarlek would not change their minds. They wanted Earth, and they would take it. As the meeting ended, Miller said, "We will defend our home." Exerthan's eyes narrowed. "Then you will die." As Miller's team walked back to their ship, Dr. Green whispered, "They never planned to negotiate." Miller nodded. "I know." They were halfway to their ship when the attack came. Zarlek soldiers appeared from behind rocks, firing weapons that shot blue light. "Run," Miller shouted, pulling out his gun. Private Joe Lewis fell first, his chest burned by blue light. Then Sergeant Ryan Cooper went down protecting Dr. White. Miller fired back as he ran. Lieutenant Peters and Dr. Green made it to the ship with him. Dr. White was hit in the leg, but Miller carried her aboard. As their ship lifted off, larger ships appeared. The Zarlek had planned this ambush all along. "Get us out of here," Miller shouted to the Krall pilot. The ship shook as it was hit. 2 Krall crew members died when a wall exploded. Somehow, they made it to safety, jumping to faster than light speed. Miller looked at the survivors. Just him, Peters, the injured Dr. White, and Dr. Green from the Earth team. 3 Krall remained from their crew of 10. "They never wanted peace," Miller said softly. "We need to warn Earth. The war has already started." As their damaged ship limped home, Miller knew humanity faced its greatest challenge. The fight for Earth had begun, and they were not ready. 3 weeks after the failed peace mission, Earth was preparing for war. Every country joined forces against the alien threat. Old enemies became friends when faced with extinction. Captain John Miller stood before the world leaders at the United Nations building in New York. His face showed the weight of those lost on the peace mission. "The Zarlek will attack soon," he said. "They have weapons we've never seen before, but the Krall are helping us prepare." President Clark nodded. "We formed the Earth Defense Alliance. Every nation has agreed to share resources and soldiers." In a lab beneath the Rocky Mountains, Chief Scientist Lisa Brown worked day and night. She was 35, with curly red hair always tied back, and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. The Krall had shared technology that she was using to create new weapons and armor. "The regular bullets won't work on Zarlek armor," she explained to Miller when he visited. "But I've made these." She held up a gun that glowed blue along its barrel. "This can pierce their protection." Miller picked up the weapon. "How many can you make?" "Not enough for everyone," she admitted, "but enough for special teams." Commander Alan Rogers was put in charge of creating these special teams. He was a tall man with dark skin and a serious face who had led soldiers in many difficult places on Earth. "I need the best," he told Miller. "Not just good soldiers, but people who can think in new ways." Together, they picked 5 soldiers for the first team, called the Ghostwalkers. Sergeant Frank Jones was first. He was a stocky man with quick hands who knew how to blow things up. He could make a bomb from almost anything. Lieutenant Mary Garcia came next. She was small but fierce, with short black hair and sharp eyes. She could make plans that surprised even her own side. Corporal Sam Wright was chosen as the team medic. He was kind but brave, able to treat wounds while under fire. Private Olivia Nelson was the quiet one. She could hit a target from farther away than anyone else. Her eyes were always calm, even when the world wasn't. Last was Specialist Eric Taylor, who understood computers and radios better than most people understood simple tools. He could hack into systems that were supposed to be safe. The team trained in a secret base in the desert. Krall soldiers watched them and were confused. "Why do you train to fight without weapons?" asked Krall, the Krall ambassador who had first contacted Earth. Rogers smiled. "Because we might not always have them." "And why do you practice in the rain?" "In the dark. In the heat," Krall continued. "Because the enemy won't wait for good weather," Rogers answered. The Krall were puzzled by human ways, but they helped where they could. They shared maps of Zarlek ships and explained how the aliens thought. "They believe in overwhelming force," Krall said. "They show their strength and expect others to give up." Miller frowned. "Humans don't work that way." 1 month after training began, the warning came. The Krall detected Zarlek ships entering the solar system. There were more than expected. A fleet of 50 large warships. "They'll be here in 3 days," Miller told the Ghostwalkers team. "Sooner than we planned." "Are we ready?" asked Lisa Brown, who had just delivered the last of the special weapons. Rogers looked at his team. They were tired from training, but their eyes were determined. "We have to be." That night, satellites showed the Zarlek ships moving faster than predicted. They would reach Earth the next day. "They're coming to destroy us," Miller said as he watched the screens showing the approaching fleet. "But they don't understand humans yet." Around the world, people prepared. Some hid, some prayed, but many stood ready to fight. The Ghostwalkers team checked their new weapons and armor one last time. The first Zarlek ships entered Earth's atmosphere at dawn. The war for humanity's survival had begun. The Zarlek ships landed in open areas near major cities. In New Dallas, the biggest ship touched down in a large park. It was black and shaped like a claw, taller than most buildings. Smaller ships landed around it. General Xerthan himself led the attack on New Dallas. He stood at the front of his soldiers as they marched out of their ships. The general was bigger than the others, his gray skin covered in scars from old battles. His 4 eyes scanned the city with confidence. Spread out, he ordered his troops. This city will be ours by nightfall. 5 miles away, the Ghost Walkers team watched through binoculars. They had been sent to slow down the Zarlek attack and protect as many people as possible. There are hundreds of them, said Private Nelson, the team's sniper. And their weapons are bigger than ours. Commander Rogers nodded. But we know the city better than they do. We'll use that. The team split up. Lieutenant Garcia led half the team to set traps in the buildings. Sergeant Jones placed small bombs that could be triggered from far away. The rest of the team, led by Rogers, moved to help people escape. The Zarlek moved through the streets in perfect lines. They expected the humans to run or surrender when they saw the alien army. But as they turned onto Main Street, something strange happened. A small group of human soldiers appeared at the end of the street. They were wearing the new armor that Lisa Brown had created. It was dark blue and seemed to bend light around it, making the soldiers hard to see clearly. "Surrender now," a Zarlek officer called out. The human soldiers didn't answer. Instead, they fired their new weapons. Blue light shot out and cut through Zarlek armor like it was paper. Before the aliens could react, the humans vanished into a side street. After them, the officer ordered. The aliens followed, but when they turned the corner, the humans were gone. Suddenly, windows above them shattered, and more shots came from above and behind them. The Zarlek were caught in the open. Across the city, the same thing was happening. The humans would appear, attack, and disappear before the Zarlek could respond properly. They never stayed in one place long enough for the aliens to use their bigger weapons effectively. General Exur-Than received reports from all his units. They were being attacked from all directions but couldn't find the main human army. "This is not how battles are fought," he growled to his officers. "Where is their army? Why do they not face us directly?" As the day went on, the Zarlek pushed deeper into the city. They destroyed buildings and attacked any humans they found. But the human soldiers kept appearing and disappearing, striking when least expected. Near sunset, Rogers and his team set off the traps that Sergeant Jones had placed earlier. Buildings collapsed, blocking streets and trapping groups of Zarlek soldiers. The aliens were forced to break into smaller groups, making them easier targets. General Exur-Than watched in growing anger as his carefully planned attack fell apart. The humans were not fighting the way his intelligence said they would. They were not using tanks or large groups of soldiers. Instead, they used small teams that moved like ghosts. "Enough of this," he finally said. "Bring in the hovering platforms." Large platforms rose from the main ship, carrying heavy weapons. These began firing at all buildings where humans might be hiding. Entire blocks were destroyed in minutes. Rogers saw the destruction and called his team. "Fall back to position 2. They're getting desperate." As night fell, the Zarlek expected the humans to stop fighting. On their world, battles paused at night. But the attacks continued in the darkness. The humans seemed to see just as well at night, using special goggles that Lisa Brown had created. By midnight, General Exur-Than made a decision he had never made before. He ordered his troops to return to their ships. As the Zarlek retreated, the humans of New Dallas celebrated their first victory. But Rogers and his team knew this was just the beginning. The real war had only just started. On the main Zarlek ship above Earth, General Exur-Than called his war council together. 6 high-ranking officers stood around a large table showing a map of Earth. Their faces were grim. "Tell me why we failed in New Dallas," Exur-Than demanded. His 4 eyes glowed with anger. Officer Draz, the head of ground forces, stepped forward. "The humans did not fight as expected, General. They used small teams instead of armies. They struck quickly and disappeared. And they kept fighting even when wounded," added Officer Krell, who led the medical division. "We found Zarlek soldiers who had been killed by humans who should have been too injured to fight." Exur-Than slammed his fist on the table. "These humans fight like nothing we've seen. They don't surrender when defeat is logical. Back on Earth, the Earth Defense Alliance had set up a special room to listen to Zarlek communications. Specialist Eric Taylor from the Ghostwalkers team had created a program to translate their language. Lissa Brown and Captain Miller stood behind him as he worked. "I'm in their system," Taylor said, his fingers moving quickly over his keyboard. "They're having some kind of meeting." The room's speakers came to life, and they heard Exerthan's angry voice. "They don't fight like a civilized species. They hide. They trick. They keep fighting when they should surrender." Miller smiled. "They expected us to line up and fight in the open, where their better weapons would win easily." Another Zarlek voice spoke. "General, I have studied Earth's history as you ordered. These humans have fought wars constantly throughout their existence. They have fought in every possible environment. Deserts, snow, jungles, cities, even under the ocean. They've already attacked 3 more of our landing sites," a different voice reported. "Always with the same methods. Small teams, quick attacks. Then they vanish. Our soldiers are becoming afraid." Xerthan's voice became cold. "Fear is weakness. The Zarlek do not fear." "But General," the officer continued, "these humans don't react to fear the way other species do. When we destroy their buildings, they don't run away. They become angry and fight harder." Lissa Brown looked at Miller. "They're starting to understand us." "Too late for them," Miller replied. On the Zarlek ship, Exerthan studied the reports from Earth. In Chicago, Zarlek forces had been trapped in flooded tunnels. In Beijing, humans had used the narrow streets to ambush his troops. In Cairo, they had used a sandstorm as cover to attack and steal Zarlek weapons. "We need to change our approach," Exerthan told his officers. "If they won't fight properly, we will force them to. Prepare the destroyers." Officer Vex, the youngest of the council, spoke carefully. "General, I have an idea. These humans are protecting their homes and families. What if we offered to spare civilian areas if they meet us in open battle?" Xerthan considered this. They would never agree. And if they did, they would not keep their word. "Like we wouldn't keep ours?" Vex asked quietly. The general stared at Vex. "Be careful, officer. That sounds like sympathy for the enemy." On Earth, the Ghostwalkers team was planning their boldest move yet. Commander Rogers pointed to a hologram of the main Zarlek ship. "Our Krull allies have identified the ship's weak points," he explained. "If we can get aboard, we can steal their battle plans and maybe even damage their systems." Lieutenant Garcia studied the hologram. "It's heavily guarded. How do we get in?" Rogers smiled. "We use their own ships. The Krull helped us capture one of their small shuttles. We'll disguise it and fly right up to them." Sergeant Jones checked his explosives. "Even if we get in, we might not get out." "It's worth the risk," Rogers said. "Right now, they're planning something big. We need to know what it is." That night, as the Ghostwalkers prepared for their dangerous mission, Exerthan stood looking down at Earth from his ship. The blue planet glowed in the darkness of space. "I will understand how they think," he promised himself. "And then I will break them." The captured Zarlek shuttle was smaller than a school bus, but larger than a car. It was dark gray with strange symbols on its sides. The Ghostwalkers team climbed inside, each checking their weapons one last time. "Remember," Commander Rogers said, "we need to get to their main computer room, copy their battle plans, and get out. No heroes today." The shuttle lifted off from a hidden base in the mountains. It flew high into the night sky, heading toward the large Zarlek ship that hung above Earth like a dark star. Specialist Taylor had programmed the shuttle to send the correct signals so the Zarlek would think it was one of their own. 2 minutes to docking," Taylor said. His hand shook slightly as he worked the alien controls. Lieutenant Garcia looked at her team. "Once we're inside, we follow the map the Krull gave us. If we get separated, meet back at the shuttle in 1 hour." The shuttle approached the huge ship and entered a large opening on its side. It landed in a bay filled with similar shuttles. So far, no alarm had sounded. "Now comes the hard part," Rogers whispered. The team put on helmets they had taken from dead Zarlek soldiers. They wouldn't fool anyone looking closely, but might help them move through the ship without immediate notice. They left the shuttle and moved quickly through the docking bay. Two Zarlek engineers looked at them but turned away, not realizing they were humans in disguise. The team found a service corridor and followed it deeper into the ship. While the Ghostwalkers carried out their mission, Lisa Brown worked in her lab on Earth. She had been studying the Zarlek weapons they had captured. Now she understood how they worked. Their weapons use sound waves, she explained to Captain Miller. That's why our regular armor doesn't stop them. Miller picked up one of the new devices Brown had created. It was a small box that could be attached to a soldier's belt. "This creates a field that disrupts their weapons," Brown said. "It won't stop them completely, but it will reduce the damage by half." "Can you make enough for all our forces?" Miller asked. Brown nodded. "Production started yesterday. And there's more. I've modified our own weapons to target the weak spots in their armor. Aim for the joints. They're less protected." Back on the Zarlek ship, the Ghostwalkers had reached the central computer room. It was a large space filled with glowing screens and strange machinery. Two Zarlek officers worked at the controls. Sergeant Jones created a distraction by setting off a small explosion in a nearby corridor. When the officers ran to investigate, the team slipped into the room. "Hurry," Rogers told Taylor. "We won't have much time." Taylor connected a device to the alien computer. It began copying everything it could find. The screen showed battle plans, ship locations, and details about Zarlek weapons. "Look at this," Private Nelson said, pointing to one screen. "They're planning to attack our water supplies next." Taylor downloaded everything. "Got it. Let's go." Just as they turned to leave, the door opened. General Xerthan himself walked in, followed by 4 guards. He stopped, his 4 eyes widening in surprise. "Humans," he roared. "Here, in my ship." The guards raised their weapons, but the Ghostwalkers were faster. They fired first, hitting 2 guards. Rogers threw a special grenade that released a thick smoke. In the confusion, the team ran past the general and into the corridor. "After them." Xerthan shouted. "Don't let them escape." Alarms sounded throughout the ship. The Ghostwalkers ran through corridors, fighting when they had to, hiding when they could. They were heading back to the shuttle bay, but Zarlek soldiers were everywhere now. "We're not going to make it to the shuttle," Garcia said as they hid in a storage room. Rogers looked at Taylor. "Did you send the data to Earth?" Taylor nodded. "Just before we ran. They have everything we found." "Then we've completed the mission," Rogers said. "Now we just need to find another way off this ship." Corporal Wright, who had been looking through the storage room, called them over. "I think I found something that might help." The team gathered around what looked like spacesuits, but designed for Zarlek bodies. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Jones asked with a smile. Rogers nodded. "Sometimes to get out, you need to go out." The Ghostwalkers team put on the Zarlek spacesuits. They were too big and shaped wrong for human bodies, but they might work long enough for an escape. "These suits connect to the outside of the ship," Rogers explained. "The Zarlek use them for repairs. We can use them to reach the hull and jump." "Jump?" Corporal Wright asked. "To where?" "To Earth," Rogers said. "We're in orbit. With these suits, we might survive re-entry." It was a crazy plan, but they had no other choice. The storage room door wouldn't hold much longer against the Zarlek trying to break in. One by one, they entered the airlock at the back of the storage room. Taylor figured out how to operate it. The outer door opened, showing the blackness of space. Earth was below them, beautiful and blue. "Now," Rogers ordered, and they pushed away from the ship. At first, they floated in space. Then Earth's gravity began to pull them down. The suits heated up as they entered the atmosphere. Parts began to burn away. "Stay together," Garcia shouted over the radio. But the heat and speed were too much. The team members were separated as they fell toward Earth. On the Zarlek ship, General Xurthen watched the humans escape. He was not angry, but curious. "They jumped from my ship," he said to Officer Vex, "into space, without proper equipment. They will die," Vex said. "Perhaps," the general replied. "But these humans continue to surprise me." Xurthen went to his private room and read more reports about humans. He learned about their wars, their survival in harsh conditions, their ability to keep fighting when all seemed lost. "They are primitive," he said to himself, "but there is something in them I have not seen before." On Earth, the data from the Ghostwalker's mission was already being used. Lisa Brown worked with scientists around the world to create better weapons and defenses. The Krull provided ships to help fight the Zarlek in space. Captain Miller led the search for the Ghostwalker's team. 3 days after their space jump, they found Sergeant Jones in a forest. He was injured but alive. The next day, they found Lieutenant Garcia in the ocean, floating in what remained of her spacesuit. One by one, they found the whole team, scattered across different parts of the world. All were hurt, but alive. When they were brought to the hospital, the doctors were amazed. "No one should have survived that fall," one doctor told Miller. "You don't know these soldiers," Miller replied. While the Ghostwalkers recovered, the war continued. Earth forces used their new knowledge to fight back more effectively. They attacked Zarlek ships in space and their bases on the ground. Humans were still outnumbered and had less advanced technology, but they were learning and adapting quickly. A week after the space jump, General Xurthen called for a special prisoner to be brought to his ship. It was a human soldier who had been captured during a battle in Europe. The soldier, a young man named Steve Baker, stood before the general with his hands tied. "Human," Xurthen said, "I want to understand your species. Why do you keep fighting when you cannot win?" Baker looked the alien general in the eyes. "Because we're fighting for our home. For our families. We don't need to win every battle. We just need to keep you from winning the war." "Interesting," Xurthen said. "On my world, battles are fought for land, for resources. The strong take from the weak. It is simple." "Nothing about humans is simple," Baker said. For hours, Xurthen questioned the human. He asked about Earth's history, about human emotions, about why they'd fought in so many different ways. Baker answered truthfully, seeing no reason to hide these things. As the interrogation continued, Officer Vex watched. He noticed something strange. The general wasn't trying to get military information. He truly wanted to understand humans, and the human wasn't afraid. Despite being a prisoner, Baker spoke to Xurthen as if they were equals. "General," Vex said later, "I believe we have underestimated these humans." Xurthen nodded slowly. "Yes, and that may be our greatest mistake." 3 months into the war, both sides had changed. Humans had learned to use captured Zarlek technology. The Zarlek had adapted some of their tactics to fight against human guerrilla warfare. But the biggest change was in General Xurthen himself. In his private quarters on the main ship, Xurthen had created a strange collection. He had gathered human books, art, music, and even food. He spent hours studying them, trying to understand the species that fought so differently from any he had encountered before. "Send in the prisoner," Xurthen ordered. Steve Baker was brought in. After weeks as a prisoner, he was thin but still stood tall. Xurthen had kept him alive, questioning him almost daily. "Sit," the general said, pointing to a chair. "Tell me about this." He held up a small painting of a woman standing on a beach, looking out at a stormy sea. "It's art," Baker said, "just a painting." "But why create it? It serves no military purpose. It does not increase your species' chance of survival." Baker smiled. "Not everything we do is about survival, General. Some things we do because they make life worth living." Xurthen's 4 eyes blinked slowly. This concept seemed new to him. On Earth, the Ghostwalkers team had recovered from their space jump. They sat in a meeting room with Captain Miller and Lisa Brown, planning their next mission. "The data you stole has been incredibly valuable," Brown told them. "We now understand their shield technology and have found a weakness." Miller pointed to a map showing Zarlek positions around the world. "They've set up a planetary shield generator here, in the mountains of what used to be Colorado. If they complete it, our Krull allies won't be able to bring in more ships to help us. So we take it out," Rogers said simply. The plan was complex but clear. While Earth forces launched attacks around the world to distract the Zarlek, the Ghostwalkers would infiltrate the shield generator and destroy it from the inside. That night, as human forces prepared for what might be their last big attack, Exurthan received a message from the Zarlek Emperor. The Emperor's face filled the screen in Exurthan's room, its 6 eyes glowing with anger. "General, you have failed to conquer this simple planet," the Emperor said. 3 months, and these primitives still resist." "They are not as primitive as we thought, Emperor," Exurthan replied. "They fight with creativity and determination." "That." "Enough," the Emperor interrupted. "I do not want excuses. I want results. You will use the planet destroyer." Exurthan hesitated. "The planet destroyer will kill everything on Earth. There will be nothing left to conquer. It will serve as an example to other worlds who might resist us," the Emperor said coldly. "You have 3 days to prepare it." When the message ended, Exurthan stood quietly for a long time. Then he called for Officer Vex. "The Emperor has ordered the use of the planet destroyer," he told Vex. "We are to kill every living thing on Earth." Vex's eyes widened. But that would be wasteful. The humans could be valuable. Their adaptability, their creativity. "I know," Exurthan said. "I have learned much from studying them. They fight not just for survival, but for ideas, for art, for their way of life." "What will you do, General?" Vex asked. Before Exurthan could answer, alarms sounded throughout the ship. A voice came over the speakers. "Multiple human attacks detected worldwide. All forces respond." The Earth's coordinated attack had begun. While Zarlek forces rushed to defend their positions around the globe, the Ghostwalkers team approached the shield generator in Colorado. "This is it," Rogers told his team as they moved through the trees toward the alien structure. "Once we get inside, we'll have 10 minutes to plant the bombs and get out before it all comes down." What they didn't know was that General Exurthan had secretly ordered extra guards at the shield generator. He had guessed what the humans would do. As the Ghostwalkers neared their target, dozens of Zarlek soldiers waited for them. "Something's wrong," Lieutenant Garcia whispered. "There are too many guards." "It's a trap," Rogers realized. But it was too late. The Zarlek opened fire, and the Ghostwalkers were surrounded. The Ghostwalkers were taken to a holding cell inside the shield generator. Their weapons were gone, and guards stood at the door. It seemed like their mission had failed. "What now, Commander?" Sergeant Jones asked Rogers. Before Rogers could answer, the door opened. General Exurthan himself walked in, with Officer Vex beside him. The general looked at each human carefully. "You are the soldiers who jumped from my ship into space," he said. "The ones who should have died but didn't." "What do you want?" Rogers asked. "I want to understand," Exurthan said. "You fight when you should surrender. You risk death when you could live. Your prisoner, Baker, speaks of fighting for ideas, not just survival. Explain this to me." Lieutenant Garcia stepped forward. "We fight for freedom, for the right to live our lives our own way, even if it means dying. Some things are worth dying for," she replied. Exurthan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The Emperor has ordered me to destroy your planet, to kill every living thing on Earth." The humans looked at each other. Rogers spoke next. "Then why are we talking? Why not just kill us now?" "Because I am uncertain," the general admitted. In 300 years of conquering planets, I have never questioned my orders. Until now. He turned to leave, then stopped. Your species has changed how I see the universe. That is uncomfortable. After Xerthen left, Officer Vex stayed behind. He looked around quickly, then lowered his voice. The General is not the only one who has been watching you humans, he said. Many of us have begun to question our Empire's ways. He handed Rogers a small device. The controls to your cell. When the alarms sound, you will have your chance. An hour later, alarms blared throughout the facility. The door to their cell opened. The Ghostwalkers found their weapons in a nearby room and continued their mission. What's happening? Nelson asked as they ran through the corridors. They got their answer when they reached the main control room. On the screens, they saw Zarlek ships firing on each other. Some of the aliens were fighting against their own kind. It's a rebellion, Rogers realized. They quickly planted their bombs around the shield generator's core. As they worked, more alarms sounded. The main door to the control room burst open. General Xerthen entered, followed by several guards. Stop them, he ordered. The guards raised their weapons, but Officer Vex suddenly turned and fired at them. Two fell before the others realized what was happening. In the confusion, Rogers activated the bombs. 2 minutes until detonation. Everyone out. The humans ran for the exit. Vex followed them, but Xerthen blocked their path. You would destroy everything I have worked for, he asked Vex. I would stop us from destroying ourselves, Vex replied. This endless conquest, it has made us less than what we could be. Xerthen raised his weapon, aiming at Vex. For a moment, no one moved. Then the general lowered the gun. Go, he said quietly. The Ghostwalkers and Vex ran from the building. Behind them, the shield generator exploded in a ball of fire. The blast knocked them to the ground, but they were far enough away to survive. Above Earth, the battle in space continued. Ships loyal to Vex and other rebel officers fought against those following the Emperor's orders. The planet destroyer was damaged before it could be used. In the days that followed, news spread across the galaxy. For the first time in its history, the Zarlek Empire was divided. Many had seen the humans fight for freedom and begun to question their own lack of it. 1 month later, a peace treaty was signed. The rebels, led by Vex, formed a new government. The old emperor was overthrown. Earth remained free. At the signing ceremony, Captain Miller stood with the Ghostwalkers team. Across the table sat Vex and other Zarlek officials. General Xerthen was not there. He had disappeared after the battle at the shield generator. Where do you think the general went? Miller asked Vex. To learn, Vex replied. He took many human books and art with him. He said he needed to understand what makes your kind fight as you do. A year later, a small ship landed outside the rebuilt United Nations building in New York. From it stepped General Xerthen, alone and unarmed. He requested to speak to Earth's leaders. I have come to thank you, he told them. Your species taught mine that there are things worth fighting for beyond conquest. Ideas, principles, freedom. He looked at the Ghostwalkers team, who stood at the back of the room. You fight like nothing we had ever seen. And now we know why.